Welcome to the FilmGamer podcast, season 5, episode 3, number 53 overall. Yes, I finally got it to line up. No, I haven't fixed a reverb problem that I have had since I set it up this way, which I set up again because I am trying something new and we'll see how it goes. Welcome to the Film Camera Podcast, everybody. And wait 1 second while I set it up via video. Do 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 do. So I got my PlayStation here. I have Okay, currently I'm trying to figure out what the minimum requirements of the game Blueprints are, which is one of the best reviewed games of the year. And it turns out, although I clear, you know, almost every other category, my graphics card is getting old. So I wonder, would I be able to go underneath with my 1050 Ti graphics card or not? But let's get to the main show, which is the weekend box office. This weekend, How to Train Your Dragon remained on top with $37 million, and it's making money. Don't worry, Reddit box office, you don't have to worry about it. It's a gigantic hit. Now, when these movies make money, it doesn't like it's making money. There becomes a level where it's like unquestionably profitable. This movie costs like 150 million. It's pretty much a shot-for-shot remake of the original. It's quote-unquote live action, but of course, uses a CGI dragon, Hiccup, who isn't that different. So it's made about 358 million on a $150 million budget. Second place is 28 Years Later, which has made 30 million domestically, 60 million worldwide on a 60 million budget. Now, this was originally um, take my ginger ale off the table there. Maybe that'll help. Um, this was originally um, made as a 75 million picture, but the taxes came in, and there you go. So 28 Years Later is the movie that I want to see in theaters this week. And if you're just joining me now, this is the Film Gamer Podcast, Season 5, Episode 3, number 53 overall. And this week I'm going to go see 28 Years Later. And I'll be back with the next podcast episode and give you a review. And I've been wondering, do I want to try and pod more than once a week? Because I think I need to step my game up. You can see here I'm trying to bring in the video, and you know, my enemy is simplicity, I guess, because you have something perfect that's like 80, 90% of the way there. You want to push that 10%. It's like they say, good is the enemy of great. And I want to be great, but because of that, I don't really um, focus too well. But, we all try. Number 3 at the box office is Elio for 21 million. Overall, it's made about 45 million worldwide. It cost about 150 million. Now, when Elemental came out, the CEO of Pixar or Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures, one of those divisions, came out and said, sorry, not last year, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, when Elemental came out, he mentioned about the cost because that movie cost in the realm of 200 million, and they tacked on like animation costs. They upgraded all their computers and equipment, so it was that kind of investment, and they also include in their price what the executives get paid, that kind of overhead and distribution and marketing that other companies do not. So in many ways, Elio is more efficient. I don't know why everybody is up in arms that Elio is some kind of massive bomb, as if Pixar isn't going to survive. And they're like, oh no, they're going to go back to sequels. And it's like, okay, do you want sequels or not? Like, why is this an issue? We have an original movie that came out well reviewed, not at the tip top of Pixar's glory days. This generation of Pixar students, I'll say, the ones going back to, I don't know because they did a string of sequels from post Inside Out. I'll just go from 2020 onwards with their directors, or Coco and onwards because Coco was the last original hit that Pixar had that wasn't a sequel. Um, and I find it funny how they call them the sequel factory because sequels have to come from something. Um, uh, they have had well-reviewed movies that haven't been at the super high classic level that they're used to. But hey, what are you gonna do? I'm sure reviews well, people like it. It'll do solid business. I can see it matching its budget, domestically and doing well. Um, again, going by what the Disney executive said 2 years ago with Elemental, that 150 million includes the executive pay, overhead distribution, and marketing. So it's not going to be a huge loss. And, I look forward to seeing it on Disney Plus. Yeah. Um, and I still haven't seen Luca though, which his cousin is Elio in it. So maybe I need to brush up on that, which, people thought that was an okay movie. Um, Number four is Lilo and Stitch. This has made a huge metric ton of money, 386 million. I think again, $150 million, no, $100 million budget. And yeah, it's remains to be seen whether that includes marketing because it's part of the live action division, but doesn't matter. It's made 910 million worldwide. People were rolling their eyes at this because Snow White, which just hit Disney Plus and I haven't seen because the reviews are so poor, um, it hasn't like Snow White was ready for them to move on to not doing any more live action remakes, and then they did this, and it made a ton of money after Snow White bombed, and people were like, okay, well, remakes galore. Number five is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, 6.5 million, down 37%, sizable, decent hold. It has now surpassed the domestic gross of the last film, Dead Reckoning, Part 1, forever a part one without a part two because they retooled this one. And it has made in total about $540 million. Um, it cost 400 million. I can't really do the math. Somebody once said, you get 25% from China, 40% from the rest of overseas, and then 65% of the theater take and whatnot. So, you know, doing doing the math is like, forget it. People usually say you have to make double worldwide the movie cost, which would put this at 800 million. But there are other costs too that people aren't anticipating, and I went into this on the last episode, so I won't go into it on the new one. Um, but it's basically this is part of a series of eight. I just rewatched number four on Netflix. They're all on Netflix. They're also all on Paramount Plus. They're all on DVD. A box set will come out, a 4K box set. It down the line it trickles because people check out the previous one. And that is why IP is so popular because it's so thick, basically. You come out, you have one movie like Sinners, it's good that it's a hit. Just past being the highest grossing original movie since Gravity. Um, at 277 million domestic, Gravity was like 274, also by Warner Brothers. In fact, fun fact, I got that on DVD and Blu-ray for free by winning a Facebook contest. So that was nice. 363 worldwide. Um, going going back down, getting back on track. Materialists, which I saw. Um, Fine movie, exactly what I expected. Pretty minimalist. Some good directing, good compositions and stuff. I find it funny how people were so thrown off about it not being a rom-com because I saw the trailer and said this looks like a rom-dram. And they're trying to pivot saying, well, this is more of a rom-dram-com. And it's like, well, unless you're making fun of the characters for how seriously they take the material, there's not a lot of comedy here. Um, so, you know, take it what you will. It's reasonably well done. The issue is just that halfway through you kind of realize, She kind of shouldn't be with either of the guys, Chris Evans or Pedro Pascal. Chris Evans is not because he's poor, but because he doesn't change and they break up and fight, and you're not sure that any character has really changed. And the other character doesn't really bring a whole lot to the table, and you can kind of see it coming from a mile away. Ballerina, which I also saw and liked. I'll go through both of those on Letterboxd, but basically, it had a flamethrower fight, which was so cool. I'd never seen that before. So because of that, and it was real fire, not like CGI fire. It was so well done as a stunt. I was happy that I got my money's worth. And I gave that, I think, 4 stars just for that alone because in an action movie, when they show you something you haven't seen before, you just gotta, clap, you know, um, not in the theater, but I mean like mentally, like, whoa, cheer. I was excited. I was giddy. Anyways, number 8, Karate Kid Legends. This was supposed to be Sony's like big movie of the summer, and it's made 98 million worldwide. It'll do 100 million. It'll do well on Netflix. It didn't cost that much because Sony is so cheap. Under Tom Rothman, who just got renewed for his contract. So expect more sequels to movies you forgot. It, oh, yeah, from the 80s. That was sort of a thing. That's Sony going forward pretty much. Then the occasional, prestige project that costs a little bit of money. But yeah, disappointing to see. Number 9, Final Destination Bloodlines, huge hit. Excited to see it. Maybe when it comes to Crave, or maybe I'll rent it. 280 million worldwide. It's funny how it took 6 movies for something to blow up, but hey, all at your own pace. Um, it's really unique because they're really DVD movies, I guess. And they came from a time when, there was you could be a moderate success at the box office and get most of your money back in DVD. So that's what Final Destination did. And then they had a horrible fourth film, and because the fourth film was horrible, the fifth film, which was good, did horribly, even though it was a good movie. And then because of that, it made slightly less money, so they didn't do that more. Um, then you have another Indian movie. They have them like every weekend. They make like $1 million. It's good that that niche is being served. Then number 11, you have Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme. Um, Wes Anderson movies cost in the 30 to 40 million range. I imagine they sell a lot of box sets, a lot of Criterions and stuff, and that's why, um, because they're definitely not theatrical hits most of the time. Movies like Grand Budapest Hotel, um, are like exceptions to the rule of Wes Anderson, which is they don't make money in theaters. So, you know, Indian Paintbrush, which finances these. I don't know. Maybe they just like working with expensive actors and it's a good time. If you think about the life of a producer, ideally it's having a lot of dinners with a lot of famous people. You get to release movies, you get to have your name on the title, and uh, people see you, they recognize you as somebody with power, they respect you. You have dinner, you get to hang with them, and then your movie comes out and the critics like it. What else matters? It's all about what you're willing to put into it. Somebody said the same thing about David Ellison uh, as the head of Skydance buying Paramount. It's like, why would he want to do this if he's a billionaire? Because his father, Larry Ellison, founded Oracle Technology Company, and now through his company, he's buying out Paramount. And it's just like, he's always been into the industry, started as an actor in the movie Fly Boys, and this is just what he decided to do with it, his life. And that's the estimation of Matt Bellany from the town of the podcast that I listen to. And yeah, anything else to report? One thing I wanted to report was on Twitter a few weeks ago, I looked at movies of like, okay, well, let's look down the list at movies we don't pay attention to. This is when the actual came in. And I looked at the trailers of the movies like below the top 10 from like, Sony Pictures Classics, Jane Austen Wrecked My Life. And I looked at the trailer for it. I'm like, this looks pretty good, you know? Um, and then, worth noting, I also saw Friendship a while back, and I really enjoyed that movie. That was a good comedy classic, very good screenplay, very offbeat, but yeah, that's my box office report there. Let me close this window, and now I will go into where I was, which I think was on the third after I saw the core. So I saw Predator, Killer of Killers. Um, this was a three-star movie. I had a pretty good run um, of movies this June, which I'm hoping to keep up with. And this is what I wrote of Predator, Killer of Killers, the new Predator movie. Went straight to Disney Plus. Hey, it got 2 likes. My ads on Letterboxd never do that well. But I wrote every day I get a little more upset at Spider-Verse for artistically legitimizing shitty frame rates and popularizing cheap animation. What does a guy have to do to get a movie that's not a preview for a future movie or TV series these days? Most of them never come out. True. This movie rips off Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode for its climax, which is the Gladiator Arena one in space, and of course Gladiator and Attack of the Clones. It's you're ripping off history, so it's whatever. But it always works. The Gladiator Arena always works because it's like pure fighting. And then they introduce some sort of animal and something, but it's entertaining, but I felt jerked around. This is how the director, Dan Trachtenberg, partially spent his last 3 years on a Saturday morning cartoon. I hope the upcoming movie, Predator Badlands, starring Elle Fanning and Predator, um, works out. Um, I thought Elle Fanning in a Predator movie, how's that gonna work? And then I saw that she plays a robot strapped to the Predator's back, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. It's the lore expansion. The end of this shows a close up of the character from the last movie, Prey, which is very good, um, indicating that anybody who has ever beaten a predator, maybe there's a copy of them or they get kidnapped afterwards, who knows. But yeah, Predator, Killer of Killers, 3 stars. Would recommend. It's just that gaudy animation where it's like at 12 frames a second or something. Uh, it's very annoying. And it's supposed to look stylized and cel shaded, yeah. Um, Next is Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, which of course I've already seen, and 4.5 stars and a heart here. I wrote, anyone who doesn't put this down as the best mission hasn't seen this in a while. It is slick and well made with a great cast, but so is Fallout. What elevates this is Brad Bird's direction. Little match cuts that connect shots like the good guy and the bad guy doing the same thing on a walkie-talkie, or a water fountain that sprays from one end of the room to the other, connecting various characters. The action is Spielbergian, giving Hunt one problem after another to solve, and it's the most consistent of all the movies, which is to say, like, you're not waiting for something to happen. Ooh, I want to get to this set piece. I want to get to that. No, it's good. The focus is on the mission, and although Ethan is the point man, everybody else on the team has a motivation and problem to solve. That I watched on Netflix. Solid stuff. The one gag is that I saw this in theaters, remember it, and of course have it on Blu-ray, but convenience of Netflix and whatnot, it's just a button press rather than getting up, putting the disc in. Lazy, I know. But there's a gag in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol where the subtitles start in Russian and then translate. And I remember watching it with my mom, and she was like, "Oh, that's cool. It shows how Ethan can read Russian because he can read the lips of what they're saying." And the Russian subtitles slowly translate into English. And because Netflix works internationally, those ingrained subtitles are taken out, which is the copy that they take of the movie, and so that they can be redistributed depending on which region they're playing in. So all the subtitle gags and stuff, unless it's like filmed in camera, uh, get taken out. So somebody pointed about that, about a Wes Anderson movie, The Royal Tenenbaums, of like, oh, these little jokes are lost. They're mostly gimmicks. They're few and far between. But it's worth noting that, when you rip a movie out of celluloid, sometimes you rip out its soul. Next movie I watched on June 10th, Friendship. A male bonding manifesto that at the same time feels timeless and yet very 2020s. Smartphone technology doesn't play a role in it, but it feels very like, where are we? What are we? With relationships, intense hyper focus. Um, it felt very 2025 to me. Everyone in the theater laughed out loud at different times, and it goes to show, I saw this at the screening room, the importance of seeing movies with a diverse audience. I remember going to see Poor Things, and it was all young people. Um, and I remember going to see The Favorite, same director, with old people, and the old people laughed at different times than the young people did, and it made it feel very alive. And this had that. And I wrote, it's just nice seeing the sexiest man alive act again. A little something for everyone. That's Paul Rudd, of course, who had done like Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which my God, that movie sucks. So I was like, okay, this is what Paul Rudd's doing now. Ant-Man 3 Quantumania, that sucks. He's just there to deliver dialogue and sort of be himself, but not a funny version of himself. It's annoying. Anyways, side note, I was very annoyed that I saw every Midnight Madness movie at TIFF last year, but not this one. This one was better than all of them combined. Agreed. Um, I didn't clue into at last Toronto International Film Festival that with my ticket I could go see any movie if I waited in line, not just like three. It was like the value of three equals to that. So I didn't end up seeing Friendship, but I think that was the night that I spent with the Florida guy in the bar, listening to his troubles, and thought that would like friendship would pay off, and it didn't because he had promised it to my mortal enemy, the line skipper. So, friendships don't always pay off. That's the lesson of the movie. 4 stars. Next on the docket, if we can get this page to load here, and I'm going to take a swig of my ginger ale brought to you by Canada Dry. If you're listening, go ahead and sponsor me. The Amateur. This was a movie that I wondered for a while, did I want to see instead of The Accountant 3? And although it's a more adventurous movie, although it is a remake and based on a book, um, it gets to the end and just kind of air goes out of the tires. Like nothing happens. There's no payoff. And it reeks of like, let's set this up for a sequel because we don't know how to end it. I don't know what is wrong with having a definitive ending to your movie because if you look back at the childhood movies I knew growing up, they all were like, let's do a sequel, and it was outside the narrative of the original. Because every time you're setting up a sequel, you're spending real estate um, on the story being told currently to invest in a future movie. And then, if you do get your franchise, it's like, oh, are you going to stop at number two? No. So then you get part of the second movie, which has been explained and set up in the first, and then because there's going to be a sequel after that or a trilogy, then the second movie just exists as a go-between. And if you're lucky, and they often aren't, you get a third movie. And then the third movie is so bogged down re-explaining exposition and remembering what happened before the first two films that it's not good. The best trilogies are ones when they didn't know they were going to make one. Like Star Wars didn't know that there was going to be three films. So it tells one movie beginning to end, oh, this made money, I guess we'll make a sequel. And then you can kind of pull that shit off if you're doing a second one. You can be riskier because it's really testing the audience's commitment. If you're going into the first movie and you're like, get ready for the second one, you're like, it's a wing and a prayer. It was a vampire movie from a few years ago. It was like The Invited or something, with the girl Natalie Emmanuel from Game of Thrones. And it made money and it set itself up for a sequel, but they didn't make one. I don't know why. Um, I just wrote about The Amateur, pretty good, and then ends without any meaningful resolution, which is a letdown for a 2 hour film. It ends with Rami Malek having face to face with a guy who was sort of thought was dead but could come back. Anyway, he shows up. They have a scene in a parking lot, which could have been filmed anywhere in the car. So it's not this whole movie is basically like a Bourne movie that gets a lot of mileage out of him actually going to these places, actually going to, you know, European cities and stuff like that. It's not green screen. It's by far the biggest pleasure of the movie because you're like, oh, that's cool. Like it's something that plays well on TV in that regard. Um, but this final scene is like not at any of those fancy locations, and it reeks of like reshoots of like we better put this in. It just feels like they didn't really know what to do. And the other problem too is that it has the right villain at the end who talks about how this character who's in like it's called the amateur because it's about a character Rami Malek who's basically his Mr. Robot persona, um, a tech who works for the CIA, who after his wife dies in some kind of accident, bombing, kidnapping, gone wrong, whatever you want to name it, demands training, uh, and the CIA boss is kind of like, well, you're not very good at this, but let's just see what happens. And I won't spoil uh, the rest of it because there's blackmail and other parts to it. But basically, they find out that he's not like a killer of killers, sort of like the Predator. He's sort of like Topher Grace's character in Predator, I guess. I don't know. But like he kills by proxy. And the final boss villain of this movie explains to him of like, you're a killer just like me, and the only space that you have is the moment between stop and go when you tell the people that he eventually kills, you're giving him just enough time to get away. You know, there's a scene in the trailer where he's like, if you run now, if you run fast enough, you might be able to escape the blast. And he's like, you do that so you can create distance between you and your target, so you don't feel like a killer because you're not a killer. But what's the difference? And it's like that's such a smart way of bringing together the views and stuff like that. And then the character spy guy, uh, like the way his resolution works out is sort of like undercooked, but you're like, okay, I'm gonna go with this. And then the movie just ends not 5 minutes later after a short conversation. And it's sort of like to compare it to a video game, how I felt with Resident Evil 5 of like 12 to 13, 15, 18 hour gameplay plot that ties up narrative set up in Resident Evil 1 and the bad guy who you were separated by fire with in like 98 or 96 or whenever the first Resident Evil came out and several games, Resident Evil 0, Code Veronica, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5. And you defeat the bad guy and then it's like, okay, got that, you got your partner back, all of this. What does the main character you're playing as have to say? And all he says is, more and more I find myself asking what I started for, and I'm questioning whether it's worth it. And you know what? It is. And it's like, part of that was just a repeat of his prologue at the beginning, and he's just saying, it's worth it. That's so lame for a video game. That's not satisfying to me. I want a payoff, and this movie did not pay off, which is frustrating because all of these movies need is follow through. But the very act of commerce and everything having to be a franchise and stuff, it's very rare you get a movie like The Martian where it's like, we're doing one movie, that's it. You know, um, Warfare is a movie that I gave 2.5 stars that I was really excited for. Um, Looked good in the trailer, is well reviewed, and it's co-directed by Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza, who was the military support on the movie Civil War, just making sure that the warfare was accurate. He also, I believe, did Act of Valor, so they co-directed this movie together, and it's basically in Iraq. It could be about the invasion of Fallujah or something, but it's not super specific, but my point about the movie and why I gave it 2.5 stars is that it has nothing to say that hasn't been said before. Good performances and sound, but cannot recommend. It's just basically about these guys trapped in a house, gunned down by opposition, and is a lot of yelling and firing and doesn't mean anything. And that's the whole plot of like war doesn't mean anything. It goes quiet when they leave. And for that, I thought it was a waste of time. Moving up to drop, um, I wrote The Perfect Man Doesn't Exist, but he is played by Brandon Sklenar in this film. This is a movie about a woman played by Megan Fahey, who's a mom getting back out into the dating world. She goes to a restaurant located at the top of a skyscraper and keeps getting these text drops. Crucial mistake that the movie makes is that it doesn't let her date in on the fun, nor does it immediately takes him off the table as a suspect. So she keeps getting these airdrops, basically. If you have an iPhone, it's just basically a random text from somebody in the area. And it works similarly to Bluetooth, so it could be somebody 40 feet away, and it's just saying, kill your date or your son dies. And it's a shows in a security cam footage of their son. And it's a very simple setup. And this kind of like schlocky horror movie has been done before by Christopher Landon, who's the writer and director of this movie. And the casting is good because Megan Fahey and Brandon Sklenar have not gone together in a bad movie so well since Gerard Butler and Katherine Heigl, who both made like the same shitty version of their own genders movies. So like uh, Gerard Butler made shitty guy films. Uh, Katherine Heigl made shitty girl movies. And in this one, Megan Fahey makes those kind of almost romance novel Netflix movie-esque things. She was on White Lotus. Um, she was in The Perfect Couple. She's on this new TV show with Julianne Moore, which I guess was okay. And Brandon Sklenar, he was in It Ends With Us. He was in 1923. Um, and here he is here. So they match really well, but the movie doesn't give them a lot to play off of. And I find that annoying because the romance, with very little effort in this movie, works very well. It's just tries to push forward its narrative by other means. And what's funny is that the romance sort of has stakes to it just by virtue of the actors being good, but almost none of the rest of the movie works. It's a movie that could be over in like 10 seconds. Um, because it relies on basically the villain revealing his plan, which again is fine, but like there's not enough of a build up to that. And it's just kind of like one of those live YouTube prank videos where it's like you're waiting for the shoe to just drop. So because of that, I gave it 2.5 stars. Needed a bit more sophistication, or needed to be way more over the top. And yeah, it didn't work for me, but I like the cast. Um, Next up is Clown in a Cornfield. Uh, this I wanted to see because the reviews were good. It's an IFC distributed movie. Plays horror by the book. It's actually based on a novel from 2020. Not as clever or as confident as the retread of The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which was a movie that was made by a whole bunch of people behind the scenes that were about to break out. But it has its pleasures and is short with decent characters. Yes, this is a movie that is like built on cliche, but it invests in characters just enough without being pretentious about it and you know, delivers as a clown in a cornfield. And there's killing, and it has a few decent twists to it, decent performances, good setting. Yeah, watch it if you see it on, if you're looking for something to watch. It's not amazing. I just gave it 3 stars, but it's sort of about something. It it's a horror movie that at least very broadly looks at youth of today, although the youth of today feels like youth 12 years ago in like 2013 during the YouTube era, but hey, I'll take that because you don't even get that often. It's so hard to write kids these days with social media. And, it's like all the kids that are adults want to make adult material. So, yeah, you don't get stuff like that. Number 14 is Materialists, or on the 14th, I watched Materialists. Again, 3 stars. Past lives for rich white people or white people who wish they were rich. Yeah. Uh, 3 stars. It's fine. It has a couple good compositions in it. There's a scene where basically Dakota Johnson is relaying some news to her boss, while outside there's a lot of excitement happening. Um, and I just liked how that was done. Other simple things like the way it will film the curves of, somebody lying down in bed and stuff. It just knew its lines. It it's nothing special. It's the kind of movie I feel like any decent director could do, but Celine Song liked doing it, so there you go. I wasn't surprised by it being a drama, because if I watch a movie trailer and I don't laugh, um, even if some people insist that it's a comedy, I won't. Um, The next one is The Surfer. This is a Nicolas Cage movie. This one is sort of like, I don't want to say fever dream, but I wrote saw it, but don't feel like I watched it. As a result, I declined to rate it. It was late at night, and I went up to get some headache pills and refill my water bottle one of those nights. I was somehow gone for about 20 minutes. When I came back, the plot was mostly the same, but I felt like I'd missed a significant chunk. This is something that I've started doing where I don't bother pausing movies because it makes me want to get back to it more. If I pause it, I feel like I lose momentum. Um, Unless it's a really good movie and I'm really excited by it, but there's so many movies to watch now that I feel like the enthusiasm is spread out. Um, would giving this anything from half a star to 2.5 stars be worth anything more than a drop in the Pacific Ocean? I wrote. To Nicolas Cage, it might be, but it doesn't feel worthy to me. I did not like this movie. It was a boring slog, um, but it was about something. I had something to say. It was just basically about bro culture, but from the surfer perspective, kind of a commentary on this gang that existed. I think it was in the 60s or something. These beach bullies, basically, that were like, you don't deserve the beach and stuff, and were harassing people. The problem is that it didn't need to be constrained by its location so much. Like it takes place in a parking lot mostly, and about a guy, Nicolas Cage, who can't go down to the beach that he surfed at growing up. He is there with his son and the actor Julian McMahon, who you might know from FBI or I know as Doctor Doom. Uh, this here in his native Australian accent says, "Hey, mate, can't surf here. Beach is closed," because he's not a local or something. And it's sort of like, I don't know, racism as a shorthand, prejudice against tourists, whatever you want to call it. Um, but the problem is that it's a movie about community, because surfing is about community, and because of that, it should be filmed around the community. And this movie is sort of filmed like a schlocky D-budget horror movie, which I feel like smart filmmakers who figured it out, but didn't figure out, like, in the script stage of what they were making. Because had he gone to, like, the store and done this and that kind of thing, like, I get that he has to wait by the payphone and whatnot. It's basically about a guy who, in order to foreclose on a house in the area, um, he first he loses his car gets stolen, then his phone gets stolen, then he loses his money, then his wallet and that. And it's basically like he's slowly losing things. And the moral of it, according to the surfers, was you have to see what it's like to have nothing in order to be a part of something. Which is kind of like intriguing and makes sense, but can be seen as bullying to other people because it's like, well, we already have something, so screw you. We're going to protect this and not being welcoming to foreigners, I guess. Even though that is kind of undercut by the fact that Nicolas Cage grew up there, his character did. And so it's commented on late in the movie of like, yeah, I did see you surf back then and you were good, and that's why I wanted to stop you. But it's just, I don't know. The movie was such a slog. I don't like watching these movies where, one thing happens to somebody and then something else because I've sort of been in those situations where you lose your wallet or you lose your wallet and your phone is dying, or you forget your charger and you can't go anywhere or do the thing you're supposed to be there for. So you're kind of stuck. Um, but it's also one of those where the character is a little bit too helpless. And those always bother me because even when you're at your least powered, um, it's you still have power. So I felt like that the movie was constraining Nicolas Cage's character where it didn't need to be. Um, yeah, so declined to rate it, but it rated well on Rotten Tomatoes, so it doesn't need me. Next, I saw Le Mans. Now, granted, I missed the first 20 minutes of it because it started without me, but I wrote about it. There's not a big plot here. The filmmakers themselves said we had everything. We had McQueen, we had, the racetrack, we had the technology, we had the know-how, we had the experts, we had everything but a script. And this movie is technically incredible, but needed at least an Aaron Kruger level script or something. That's sort of a joke because F1 is coming out this week and it's being written by Aaron Kruger, who, despite getting an Oscar nomination for Top Gun Maverick, isn't that great of a screenplay writer. Like he wrote um, Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, which is an awful movie. He wrote Dumbo, which is just the Tim Burton adaptation, which is just, a very, very straightforward movie that doesn't bring you anything new. I kind of find him hackish. Um, I'm sure he's paid well. But yeah, I gave the movie 3 stars. Some incredible, incredible um, photography here. Um, and it kind of took a bit of the air out of F1 for me when I see it, um, because um, F1's whole gimmick was like, we're putting the camera in the cockpit of a race car this time. You've never seen anything like this before. And then seeing this movie from 1971, it's like, well, they did it in 1971. So what is this movie gonna have to offer? Um, just another spin on the formula, I guess. Um, on the 17th, I saw two movies. Um, I find it funny that Deep Cover was, because I probably saw it later that night after Le Mans. I put on Deep Cover, and it spilled over into midnight. I always log a movie from when I finish it. Like, if it finishes at 12:30, then I finished it that day, not the night before. So, I wrote this controversially. I like it better than Deep Cover 1992, which starred Lawrence Fishburne and Jeff Goldblum, was a noir, I believe, by Bill Duke. Even though its contribution to cinema, that's Deep Cover, this one, 2025, is a net negative. Like, it's funny, it has some jokes to it, they're cleverly executed. There's one of, like, the one guy who was from Ted Lasso. He is trying to, like, get down and smashes a beer bottle, or a liquor bottle against the wall, but it doesn't break. So he has to do it a bunch of times. Things like that. It's like, that's funny, but like, this isn't a movie that's like employing theater owners or keeping theaters open. It's a movie that's like being paid for by a mostly evil company, Amazon, and is, it's not keeping theaters open or playing part of a team. It's not going to have any kind of cultural significance. It's a movie that's going to be watched once by a few people and not really again. So because of that, it doesn't have much of a cultural footprint. I wrote Deadpan and Orlando Bloom is funny. The romance in it could have used more time in the oven. Check. I do like that this movie does have a romance between one of the people undercover. The setup to the movie is basically these uh, improv actors are hired by undercover cops to go deep undercover. And because they're improvers, the moral being yes and, they can't help but go deeper and deeper, integrate with these people. And it's a movie that basically anybody could have directed, and they got anybody to direct it. I don't can't even tell you the name of the person who directed it, but there's a scene with Sean Bean and Orlando Bloom. And I said, this is the first time that Orlando Bloom and Sean Bean have shared the screen since Lord of the Rings over 20 years ago. Um, is this movie going to provide value to that audience? Because, it's a completely different movie, so it's like a reference. And this movie is above making references to other movies directly, for the most part, that I can remember. But the coverage in the scene when Orlando Bloom is in the scene with Sean Bean, I was thinking they're just doing over the shoulder, over the shoulder, over the shoulder, over the shoulder, and I thought, were they even in the same room together? And then there's one or two scenes where they are in the same shot together, but their head is turned, and it's just standard coverage. Get your wide shot, you shoot over the shoulder. That's the whole scene. You can direct a whole movie that way, and that's pretty much how this movie is directed. Aside from a few scenes, there's one notable one that I took an image of someone digging a shallow grave, while the three, Bryce Dallas Howard, the other guy in Orlando Bloom, are kneeling down, and the bad guy, played by Paddy Considine, is talking to them. And I'm like, well, this is an image. This is like one part of the movie that constitutes like an image, but it's not saying anything. I know I'm getting deep into it, but when a movie is like clever enough, like it begins with like a car chase and blah blah blah, and then the airplane flies by a building and it pans from underneath the helicopter in an impressive shot into the work office, where you've seen this a million times, where it cuts to the person who doesn't know that the action is going on. Maybe they have headphones or something, but it cuts to inside the office and doesn't cut back to the action or something. I'm like, oh, that's a clever way of telling me what the movie is about. So what annoyed me is that this movie was like clever enough to go there, but like in terms of writing it delivers, in terms of directing it doesn't. So it felt like a net waste of time, but like it was funny enough for me to recommend it. Um, but things like it having a romance, which a lot of movies avoid now. I liked. So it had all the ingredients. It just couldn't get there, which was annoying to me. Bryce Dallas Howard is turning into Jessica Chastain, and this is someone who didn't think that they looked alike until they pointed it out themselves. Yes, Bryce Dallas Howard did a video one time of like, I am not Jessica Chastain, and like, I always believed that because the first time I saw Bryce Dallas Howard outside the Village, which was her like debut, she was Gwen Stacy in Spider-Man 3, which I always thought was weird seeing her blonde, but she's been blonde in other stuff. And Jessica Chastain came along a long time later, but now it's weird seeing them because they're both like settled into their careers and like in their 40s and stuff. So I don't know. Maybe they just seem very much like each other. Um, Anyways, I laughed a few times in this movie, despite the most rudimentary screenplay in the world and the most basic screenplay imaginable. It had some laughs. I thought Orlando Bloom, even though he was like not super well cast, being deadpan or something, it was different. And it's like an easy role to play of like the aloof guy trying to be dark. Uh, there's a really funny joke where he talks about, some scars never heal. And he has a very recent scar and he's trying to act tough. He's like, that looks pretty decent. And he's like, yeah. He's like, where'd you get it? And he says something like Iraq or Afghanistan or something. And he's like, but the scar looks recent. And he's like, well, when you're tortured by people in Guantanamo, some wounds never heal. And then he's like, so you worked for the Taliban? And he's like, now you're starting to get the fucked up picture. And it's like, okay, well, that's, amusing because it's like him using in his improv, to escalate. And then it hilariously comes up again because he's an actor who joins improv. So, like, one of his commercials comes on in the middle of, like, being undercover, and that's why he has to pretend to be another actor. So, again, a lot of funny comedic ideas. It's just wrong delivery platform. Um, yeah. Um, so, Ballerina, 4 stars. Flamethrower fight was so hot. I've never seen something like that before in a movie before. This is why we go to the movies. Ana de Armas has never looked better. Story's not good. Um, it was inspired by John Wick 2. The screenwriter saw the trailer for John Wick 2 and thought, what if there was like a deadly ballerina that was existed in the world of John Wick or something? And that screenplay ended up getting bought by Lionsgate. They formatted it into a John Wick movie, and while they were doing that, they added some scenes into John Wick 3, and so there was some ballerina stuff there, and this is where this movie takes place in between John Wick 3 and 4. So it's kind of like a franchise expansion. Although I mentioned it's doing like just fine, like at about um I don't know, about 100 million worldwide. If I can, now that I've talked about it, I have to bring it up and look at it exactly because it was like around 98 million, last weekend, so I want to give an update to it. Uh, yeah, just crossed 100 million. So, it'll do fine on home video and stuff. I wonder it'll probably be packaged in with John Wick and whatnot. Um, as to whether they'll do a sequel or something, I don't know. You'll have to see Nobody 2, which comes out in August. Nobody 1, I thought was fine. It was a bit flat-footed. This sequel coming out in August looks equally flat-footed, more tired. Like I thought that it was like a nice novelty during the pandemic when the first one came out. The action looks okay. The action in this one, there are some scenes where it's just kind of like, yeah, yeah, whatever. And then, the flamethrower fight is like absolutely amazing. There's tension, there's danger. You see them in the same shot. And you're like, okay, well, how did they do that? Because it honestly looked like better than some of the stuff in Mission Impossible. Like the stunt Oscar isn't coming for, another 2 years until the 100th Oscars. Next year, I think, is 98. But um, I was thinking, like, I'd give this possibly over Mission Impossible stunts for best stunts if it were an Oscar. Um, and then, you watch some TV. I will say now I finally finished Dope Thief, which was an Apple TV show that I started watching, written by Peter Craig. Ridley Scott directs the first episode, and it's about two guys played by Brian Tyree Henry and Wagner Moura from Civil War, and also Pablo Escobar, and they are basically DEA agents with a badge who are revealed not to be DEA agents, but just guys who go around and like to rip off and steal from drug dealers. The first scene is a great moment of tension. You're like, oh, I hope the whole story is like this, and then it's like, no. By the end of the first episode, they try and do the same thing again, also very tense, but they end up taking out some undercover cops and are talked over the radio by some spooky voice, and the rest of the series is them on the run, mostly sitting in their houses and hospital rooms and stuff, while the other guy, who Wagner Moura's character, is you know trying to he's a Catholic or whatever, so he has stuff going on with his girlfriend, and because they're being hunted by sinister forces or whatever while pretty much staying in Philadelphia. um they he Brian Tyree Henry is trying to get his mother, played by Kate Mulgrew, from Orange is the New Black, out of town, but then she shows up again, and it's just basically like, oh, the plot trying to get started and going again, and then not going again. And the performances are good. It's reasonably set up. There's another thing that pays off, which is the people that they rip off, one of the cops, goes through a really major arc, but they get shot by Brian Tyree Henry and kind of like recover, and it comes together at the end. But it it just felt labored to me. Like it could have been a couple episodes cut down. It basically could have been a movie, and it feels like something, again, it's based on a book that could have been adapted into a movie, and they decided to stretch out into a TV show, which is most of Apple TV stuff. It's just like a movie stretched out to television length, which is annoying. Um, but yeah, yesterday. Um, Oh, so what would I rate the TV show out of 10? At six, I'd give it a six. Another Apple TV thing because I was just kind of like when I finished this movie, I'm like, okay, might as well finish Dope Thief. But this movie also on Apple TV Plus, Echo Valley. It's just basically about Sydney Sweeney kills a guy over some drugs and goes to her mom to cover it up, and then people come looking, and bad guys come looking. And that's just basically the setup. Again, I believe it's also a Ridley Scott-esque project. I know for sure Dope Thief is. Um, so it's fine. You know, it's not going to be any Alien Earth, but anyways, I gave this 2.5 stars and wrote Julianne Moore effortlessly holds the screen as she does, has done millions of times. My favorite role of hers is actually The Forgotten from about 2005, Forgotten movie from 2005, um, about a woman whose child goes missing and is basically gaslit, and it turns out that the people who have taken her kids are supernatural forces. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, anyways, um, Sydney Sweeney is okay in a surprisingly minor role for a character who drives much of the narrative. She's kind of like sort of dispensed with, and I don't mean that like necessarily literally or anything, but it's just kind of like she shows up and then like hides out elsewhere, and you're like, is the movie gonna go back to her? I guess not. And then Domhnall Gleeson shows up, gives what might be his best performance and sort of like an oversized role for somebody you're like, oh, this guy is gonna be like one of the main characters. Okay, and the screenplay doesn't really, it's not structured super well. Like it progresses logically, I guess, but it's not set up super well. Like it's set up for one thing and then just drifts into another. There's no rug pull. Like Kyle MacLachlan nails his one scene that's like about 30 seconds to a minute long, and you're like, oh, it's gonna suck when he finds out about like this, when he's dragged into the story. And it's like, no, he doesn't. There's like a subplot with Fiona Shaw, what might be Madeline Stowe. I don't know. She's not listed in the credits, but it looks like Madeline Stowe anyway. And it's basically a movie mostly that's like 20 to 25% Sydney Sweeney, like 50 to 75% Domhnall Gleeson. And then like, you know, the rest is Julianne Moore and Fiona Shaw, and you're like, oh, so like Julianne Moore is like a lesbian, but but before she was a lesbian, she was with Kyle MacLachlan, and they had Sydney Sweeney, and then she married Fiona Shaw, and they're getting a divorce or something. I don't know. It's like this. What's funny is that like this is a movie which should have been a TV show. And Brad Inglesby is like a TV writer. He wrote Mare of Easttown. And he's writing another TV show called Task for HBO, which looks like, the most generic cops and robbers drama there is. And so was Mare of Easttown. Just had like a really good actor. And this one has a okay actor who I like, Mark Ruffalo, he's kind of people like to see him be him. That's why he's so good in 13 Going on 30, which again I saw and remarked on of just like he's good being himself. So watching him be someone else, like I don't think he's particularly great in Zodiac, where he's a detective. He's like fine, but we'll see. That TV show comes out in September, but like Brad Inglesby, who created that show or wrote this, not one of his better scripts, but I don't think he's the best writer. I think he's like fine, pretty much, like one step above average, maybe, but not in this movie. That said, the director, who I can't recall, noting like Julianne Moore is good, Sydney Sweeney is good, Domhnall Gleeson is good, Kyle MacLachlan is good. This director must be really good with performances. Like these are all pretty decent actors, but it feels like he maximizes them. So like good for them, you know? It's just they're dependent on whatever script is coming along. And then finally today I saw Decision to Leave, which you know, this is what I wrote. Great love stories warrant longing. in long lengths, but this flick was just a fling. It's well made and interesting, but didn't live up to the hype for me. It premiered at Cannes, and Park Chan-wook, the director of Old Boy, who directed this as well. So, high standards. Um, I wondered if the subtitle translation was poor, and that's what did it for me because starting off, I'd wondered if I was missing something. Granted, I cut out all the credits and then started. One night I'm like, oh, I'm gonna watch this, and then I came to my senses. I'm like, it's late at night. I'm not gonna do this again, where I like sleep in really late, um, because I watched a movie. Even though this is a good movie, that would be like, oh, it's late at night, something to put on. Like if you can read subtitles late at night, this is good. Not a whole lot of visual, like there's visuals here and there, but it didn't tell its story visually as much as I wanted it to. Um, but anyways, starting off, I wondered if I missed something and I had to recheck Wikipedia to catch back up on the plot. Um, I drifted off a few times, just like watching but not paying attention, uh, when on my phone, so, that's on me. But I'll find a lot of times my instincts, like, even when you're watching a movie, if you're distracted by something, like that distraction means something. It's a reflection of the movie being told in front of you. So I feel that even if I was paid attention to 100% of it, I'd still come out feeling in some way the same way. Like rarely, even if I'm being distracted, even if I'm in the theater being annoyed by someone else, do I find that it changes my grade of the movie. At the most, maybe it would go up a full letter grade or something, but that's when I'm really off, and I wasn't really off on this. It was a unique story. I enjoyed it for that. I just thought that it didn't warrant the 2.5 hour running time. Like this was should have been like a flinty 100 minutes to 2 hours. And reflecting on the decision to leave, of like the woman's decision to leave, affected by the man's decision to leave. Um, the plot of it is basically about man falls from a cliff in Korea. Was it an accident or was he pushed by his wife? The detective investigating uh, finds himself attracted to the wife and he has to investigate. You've seen this in, Michael Douglas thrillers, like Basic Instinct and Fatal Attraction. It's like the whole plot line is Michael Douglas puts his dick where it doesn't belong. The movie. So it's nice to see that reflected in, as I love seeing it in like another culture of like, oh, they were inspired by us. That's cool. Um, and Park Chan is great. And The Handmaiden is the next of his movies that I'll probably check out. That movie is like even more acclaimed, but it's like apparently even more out there and way more sexy. So I'll have to, you know, watch it, you know, on guard or something like that. I don't know, with the right audience in the right mood. But yeah, 3 stars. So overall, you get Ballerina, you get Decision to Leave, you get, Le Mans, you get Materialists, Clown in a Cornfield, some decent location work in the amateur, 4 stars Friendship, a little rewatch in there and Ghost Protocol. Maybe I should rewatch. No, I hate rewatching stuff. It feels like a waste of time because I remember stuff. And, if you don't, there's clips, there's YouTube, there's Wikipedia. Oh, yes, that. And then, it helps you mold your mind of what you think the movie is. And then when you finally rewatch it years down the road, you're like, oh, I had the wrong idea. It's this. And then you can more dramatically reconfigure and you get more out of it. So that's why I don't like rewatching stuff, ever since Shark Tale. Um, and Predator Killer. So it was a good time. Sort of like a good month. Um, so that's the film portion of the exercise. Video games. Rainbow Six Siege did an update called Siege X where they now have teams of 6-on-6, which I can't do because I don't have a next gen console. I again was mulling over an upgrade, but I still haven't beaten Cyberpunk, which is really the keystone to after that's done. I'll maybe consider moving on, but there's that. There's as well, uh, a bunch of other stuff in my backlog. Affordable Space Adventures, Frozen Wilds DLC, Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake, God of War Ragnarok if I want it, Horizon 2, which I doubt by the time I finish Frozen Wilds, unless I go right into, you know, those other titles, I doubt, you know. But going forward, especially again, Ghost of Tsushima, Yote coming out, Death Stranding 2 coming out like I think this week. Um, I kind of, I'm hoping I'll shape up into Focus, but going back to Siege X, they remodeled the lighting system. They made part of it free to play to introduce new players. Um, I've fallen into the idea of what if I instead um, uh, play one game a night competitively and then maybe others in unranked and go from there because I usually win my first match and then push it too far and like lose subsequent matches, particularly if I'm not playing with people that I don't know because you never know how your team is going to do. Um, and they try and balance it against ranking, but you never get lucky twice. So the odds are against you there. So I'm just like, I'll play one game a night, it'll have my focus, and then because it will have my focus, then I'll you know win that one and then rank up a bit. And I've gone from Copper 5 to Copper 4 to Copper 3 to now Copper 2 ever since the update, which was on the 16th. So really, in about a week, I'm moving down the line pretty well. And, I'll play tonight and see where that goes. On the website, you can see that I published my review of The Life of Chuck. Um, to do it, I had in my list in Letterboxd. So I had those rough notes, and I was sitting on those notes forever because the movie, which won the People's Choice Award at TIFF, which I couldn't believe after I'd seen the movie, because I'm like, this sucks. Um, I had my notes and I'm like, well, would make the most sense to publish it when it came out. And that was like my plan because at the time there was like a movie coming out officially that week and then the week after and then Saturday night and then da 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 and da da da. So it made sense to do that. And then Nora, like it lined up my reviews basically with how I wanted to publish them. So it made sense to publish in that way. And then like, 9 months went by and Life of Chuck was coming out and I'm like, am I gonna am I gonna publish a review of this? And so I I structured it through ChatGPT because I had just done the non-GPT run through with the last Mission Impossible, and Life of Chuck wasn't like worth it to me. So I decided I'm like, let's give the audience, the invisible audience on FilmGamer.com, like something to do with. So I fed it my notes and then fed back to it. And then, as I always do, of course, like I had to rewrite it because it will say something that, like, one of my criticisms, like, because ChatGPT also checks other people's reviews and like the history of every critic that's ever written a movie review and stuff, and it's awful with time sequencing and plot and stuff like that. Cannot go into specifics on anything. Um, it gets plot details vitally wrong, like, and so I had to. It's like ends in a tap dance in a hallway. What the heck are you talking about? I'm like, that's not the movie. So then you write it, and it's like, okay, what is this trying to get me to say through my notes? It sounds complicated, I know, but basically, I like have my raw notes, have put it into Chat GPT, spits it out in an organized fashion, and then I rewrite Chat GPT's nonsense because the plot description will be nonsense or something else will be nonsense. And so like I basically rewrite it twice. And it ideally takes me about a week to do something, whereas before it would take me, I don't want to say a month, but like to write really substantially good reviews without using AI, it takes me about a month because I write it and then I rewrite it and then I rewrite it again, like top to bottom, like 3 times. And then I send it to somebody, I do the corrections, and then they do the corrections, and then I correct their corrections and like try and organize it. It's always a process. I mean, ideally, I'd go back to the writing process of like brainstorm, choose a topic, my thesis, brainstorm, generate ideas, evaluate ideas, organize ideas, outline, but like I don't know, it's just like my brain doesn't think that way. A lot of times it depends on how I write my review. I've gone from that to Letterboxd to a review. I've written out a review cold and it's been good, and then I'll read it back and realize it's like, this doesn't, like when I read it back, I'm like, this doesn't flow. So it's always a process. It's a tricky process. But yeah, AI did help me write my Atom Fall review, I guess. Um, and again, it's just like organizing. And what's good is just that it's a Kickstarter. I commented this to my brother because I'm like, man, like I don't like using AI because I don't want to lose my sense of voice and stuff. And he's like, well, I find it's a good Kickstarter because it tells you like what not to write. And what I find is I'll put something like that into Chat GPT and being like, well, I can't write that, but that doesn't make sense. And then I'll correct it and go from there. So it's like a springboard, really. Um, but yeah, I usually spare it for things where I'm not sure how to say or what to process. A lot of times I'll watch something or play something being like, I know exactly what to say and how to do it. And a lot of times I'll just go section by section. How is the acting? How is the direction for video games? Like, how is the gameplay? How is the presentation? What were my frustrations? And sometimes I want to say something deeper because I'm always looking back and reflecting on when somebody reads this years down the line, will they get it? And I've received some fair criticism from many people because I a lot of times just write for me, and it's like, well, this doesn't like a friend of mine and I was heartbroken by this. He's like, I read some of your work and they're like, I didn't understand what you were talking about, but I liked it, and I'm like, like it's like what Roger Ebert says. It's like you have to have an understanding that like the review itself should be entertaining by itself because a lot of the people who read the reviews aren't actually going to see the movie or play the game. And my problem is like I'm always preaching to the choir, that sense of belonging. So, yeah, just figuring out who my audience is, I guess, is the toughest part. Is the audience myself? Is the audience I want people to hire me? Is the audience like a mass group of people? I don't know, but yeah. Next time, hopefully, I'll have it figured out for you, and maybe I'll have a review of 28 years later. Or it might be like Ballerina, where I was just kind of like, I reviewed John Wick 2, happy with that. I think I started a review of John Wick 4, but it was like, I like it. All of my opinions mirror basically what the critics say. I usually don't write reviews if I have nothing to add to it. Like, I didn't write a review of The Materialists. Um, didn't feel my specialty. Ballerina, do you get what you pay for? Yes. That's an easy question to answer. Streaming slop. No. Does anybody want to hear my opinion on a South Korean film? No. Does this independent Canadian horror movie, uh, do I add much to that? No. This mediocre 2.5 star film? No. So it really has to be something that really clicks with me in order to get me to like it. So yeah, hopefully next week I have some progress on my gaming backlog and I'll probably have something to say about 28 years later. But we'll see. So, thanks for listening and now watching, and see you next time.